I thought I knew everything about my best friend Jake. We'd been inseparable since we were 7 years old, shared every secret, every dream, every embarrassing moment. I trusted him with my life. But 3 months ago, he looked me in the eyes and confessed something that shattered everything I believed about our 15-year friendship. What he told me wasn't just a secret, it was a lie that had been eating away at the foundation of who I thought he was. And honestly, I'm still trying to process whether our entire friendship was built on deception. Before I continue with this story, if you're enjoying it so far, please hit that like button and subscribe for more true stories. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. Let me take you back to where it all started. Jake and I met in 2nd grade when his family moved to our small town in Ohio. I remember the exact moment. He was sitting alone at lunch, looking terrified, clutching a Batman lunchbox that I thought was the coolest thing ever. Being the overly friendly kid I was, I marched over and declared we were going to be best friends. And just like that, we were. From that day forward, we were practically joined at the hip. Every birthday party, every sleepover, every summer adventure, we did everything together. Our parents used to joke that they had accidentally adopted an extra child because we spent so much time at each other's houses. Jake was the brother I never had, the person who knew all my fears and dreams better than I knew them myself. But here's where the first crack in our perfect friendship appeared, though I didn't realize it at the time. When we were about 12, Jake's behavior started to shift in subtle ways. He became almost protective of me, but in a weird way. Like when other kids tried to become close friends with me, Jake would find reasons why they weren't good enough or trustworthy. At first, I thought he was just being a loyal friend, looking out for me. I remember this one incident clearly. There was this girl named Sarah who wanted to join our friend group. She seemed really nice, and I was excited to have another close friend. But Jake immediately started pointing out little things about her, how she gossiped about other people, how she seemed fake, how she was probably just using us to get popular. Looking back now, none of those things were really true, but 12-year-old me trusted Jake's judgment completely. The weird thing was, this pattern continued throughout middle school and high school. Anyone who got too close to me somehow ended up on Jake's bad side. He always had a reason, always had evidence of why they weren't good for me. And because I trusted him so completely, I always listened. I started to think I was just really bad at judging people's character, and that Jake was protecting me from making bad friendship choices. There was also this strange intensity in how Jake treated our friendship. He would get genuinely upset, not just disappointed, but angry if I made plans with other people without including him. He called it loyalty, and I believed him. I thought that's what best friends did for each other. But the most confusing part? Jake was genuinely an amazing friend in every other way. He was there for me through my parents' divorce, through every heartbreak, through every achievement. He celebrated my successes like they were his own and comforted me through failures like they physically hurt him too. So here's my question for you. Have you ever had a friend who seemed almost too protective of your friendship? Let me know in the comments, because what I discovered about Jake's motives will probably shock you as much as it shocked me. As we entered high school, Jake's protective behavior evolved into something I can only describe as possessive, though I didn't see it that way at the time. He had this uncanny ability to make me feel like our friendship was the most special, most important relationship in both our lives. And honestly, I loved feeling that valued and chosen. Jake started developing these elaborate theories about people's hidden motives. When I started dating my first boyfriend, Marcus, Jake immediately became suspicious. He would analyze every text message Marcus sent me, pointing out potential red flags that I never would have noticed. Look at how he said hey instead of hi, he's being distant, or he took 3 hours to respond, he's probably talking to other girls. The crazy part is, Jake was often right. Marcus did end up cheating on me, and Jake was the one who found out and told me. I was devastated, but also incredibly grateful that Jake had been looking out for me. It made me trust his judgment about people even more deeply. I started thinking that Jake had this special ability to see through people's facades, and that I was lucky to have someone so intuitive watching my back. But then I started noticing something else. Jake had this way of being incredibly charming to everyone else while simultaneously convincing me that they weren't trustworthy. Like, he would be the life of the party, making everyone laugh, being the perfect friend to everyone. But then privately, he'd tell me about all their flaws and hidden agendas. It created this weird dynamic where I felt like Jake and I were on this island together, surrounded by people who weren't quite good enough to truly understand us. The internal conflict I was dealing with was intense, though I couldn't articulate it at the time. Part of me felt incredibly special and chosen, like Jake and I had this rare, deep connection that other people just couldn't understand. But another part of me felt isolated. I started to realize I didn't have any truly close friends besides Jake. Every time I tried to develop other friendships, they would somehow fade away or end badly, usually with Jake's predictions proving correct. I also began to feel this pressure to be everything to Jake that he was to me. He shared every detail of his life with me, expected me to be available whenever he needed to talk, and got hurt if I wasn't as invested in his problems as he was in mine. It felt like love and friendship, but there was this underlying current of expectation that I couldn't quite name. The strangest part was how Jake seemed to know exactly what to say to make me feel better about any doubts I had. Whenever I started to question whether our friendship was maybe too intense or exclusive, he would remind me of all the times other people had let me down and he had been there. He would tell me stories about his other friends who had betrayed him, making me feel like we were the only two people in the world who really understood loyalty. Have you ever felt like someone loved you so much that it started to feel overwhelming, even though you couldn't explain why? Drop a comment and let me know, because Jake's confession is about to reveal the true reason behind all this intensity. Junior year of high school was when things started getting really weird, and I finally began to see cracks in the perfect picture Jake had painted of our friendship. It started with small things that I kept brushing off, but looking back now, they were massive red flags. Jake had developed this habit of showing up places where he knew I'd be, even when I hadn't specifically invited him. If I mentioned going to the library to study, he'd suddenly appear there 20 minutes later with some excuse about needing to research something. If I went to grab coffee with my lab partner Emma, Jake would text me saying he was coincidentally in the area and asking if he could join us. At first, I thought it was sweet that he wanted to spend so much time together. But then I started noticing how these coincidences would derail my other relationships. Emma stopped asking me to study together because Jake would always end up dominating the conversation or making her feel like a third wheel. My cousin Lisa stopped inviting me to hang out because Jake would somehow always end up being there, and she said it felt like she couldn't have a real conversation with me when he was around. The emotional consequences of this isolation were starting to hit me hard. I began to feel anxious when I wasn't with Jake, not because I missed him, but because I had literally forgotten how to navigate social situations without him there to guide my opinions about people. I had become so dependent on his judgment that I couldn't trust my own instincts anymore. But the most disturbing revelation came during our spring break trip to my aunt's beach house. My whole family was there, and Jake came along because he was basically considered part of the family at that point. One evening, my older cousin Rebecca pulled me aside and asked me a question that stopped me cold. "Has Jake ever told you that he's in love with you?" I immediately laughed it off and said no, that we were just best friends and Jake had never shown any romantic interest in me. But Rebecca looked at me with this expression of genuine concern and said, "Honey, the way that boy looks at you, it's not friendly. It's obsessive. And the way he monitors every conversation you have with other people? That's not normal friendship behavior." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about all of Jake's behaviors through this new lens, and suddenly, so many things started making sense in the most disturbing way possible. His sabotage of my other friendships, his intense need to be included in every aspect of my life, his ability to predict when my relationships would fail. What if it wasn't intuition? What if he was actively working to make sure I stayed isolated and dependent on him? The next day, I decided to test my theory. I told Jake I was going for a walk on the beach alone, that I needed some time to think. His reaction was telling. He got visibly upset and kept asking what I needed to think about, why I couldn't think with him there, if someone had said something to upset me. When I insisted I just needed some solo time, he looked genuinely panicked. Have you ever had a moment where you suddenly realized that someone's love for you might actually be possession disguised as protection? Because what I was about to discover about Jake would change everything. The Virata Dramatica happened exactly 2 weeks after that beach trip, and it's a moment that still gives me chills when I think about it. I had been watching Jake more carefully, trying to determine if Rebecca's observations were accurate, and what I discovered made my stomach turn. I started noticing that Jake had an almost encyclopedic knowledge of my social media activity, my schedule, and my conversations with other people more than I had realized I was sharing with him. When I mentioned something Emma had posted on her Instagram story, Jake would immediately know what I was talking about, even though he wasn't following her and she had a private account. When I casually brought up a conversation I'd had with my mom, Jake would reference details I was sure I hadn't told him. The breaking point came when I decided to do something I had never done before. I made plans without telling Jake. I asked Emma if she wanted to go see a movie after school, and I deliberately didn't mention it to anyone else. It felt rebellious and wrong, like I was betraying our friendship, but I needed to know if I could have a normal social interaction without Jake's influence. The movie was great. Emma and I had such a natural, easy conversation, and I realized I had forgotten what it felt like to be around someone who didn't analyze every word I said or make me second-guess my opinions about everything. For the first time in years, I felt like myself instead of like Jake's best friend. But when I got home, there were 17 missed calls from Jake and a series of increasingly frantic text messages. The progression was terrifying. It went from casual "Hey, what's up?" to "Are you okay?" to "I'm really worried, please call me back" to "I know you went somewhere with Emma, why didn't you tell me?" That last message made my blood run cold. How did he know I was with Emma? I hadn't posted anything on social media. I hadn't told anyone. Emma certainly hadn't told him. She barely knew him and didn't have his number. When I called him back, Jake's voice was shaky, and he immediately launched into this frantic explanation about how he had been worried something happened to me because I always told him where I was going, and he had driven by the movie theater and seen my car, and he was just concerned for my safety. But there was something in his tone, relief mixed with anger mixed with something else I couldn't identify, that made me realize Rebecca had been absolutely right. That night, I made the hardest decision of my life up to that point. I decided I needed space from Jake to figure out who I was without his constant presence and influence. I planned to tell him the next day that I needed some time to focus on myself and that while I valued our friendship, I needed to develop some independence. But Jake's reaction to my request for space was so extreme, so revealing, that it forced a confession I never saw coming. Do you think I was being unfair to ask for space from someone who claimed to just be protecting me? Let me know what you think, because Jake's response revealed the truth about our entire 15-year friendship. The confrontation happened in Jake's car outside my house. I had asked him to drive me home from school because I wanted to have a private conversation with him about needing some space. I had rehearsed what I was going to say 100 times, trying to find a way to express my need for independence without hurting his feelings or making him feel like I was rejecting our friendship entirely. "Jake," I started carefully, "I'd been thinking about our friendship lately, and I feel like I need to develop some independence. I want to make some friends on my own and have experiences that are just mine, without feeling like I need to share every detail with you or get your opinion on everything." The change in Jake's expression was immediate and terrifying. His face went completely white, and then flushed red, and his hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles went white. For a moment, he was completely silent, and I could hear his breathing getting faster and more shallow. "You want to replace me," he said finally, and his voice was barely controlled. "You want to throw away 15 years of friendship because some people have been filling your head with lies about me." I tried to explain that it wasn't about replacing him or throwing anything away, that I just needed to learn how to be my own person. But Jake wasn't listening. He started talking rapidly, reminding me of every time he had been there for me, every sacrifice he had made for our friendship, every person who had hurt me that he had helped me get over. "I have been the only person who has ever truly loved you," he said, and something in the way he said the word loved made my heart start racing with fear. "Everyone else has let you down, everyone else has proven they don't deserve you, but I have never once put anyone before you. And now you want to abandon me for people who don't even know you the way I do." That's when I realized this conversation was about to go somewhere I wasn't prepared for. Jake wasn't just upset about losing a friend, he was talking like someone who was about to lose the love of their life. "Jake," I said slowly, "what do you mean when you say you love me?" The question hung in the air between us for what felt like hours. Jake was staring straight ahead, his breathing still rapid, and I could see tears starting to form in his eyes. When he finally looked at me, the intensity in his expression made me want to get out of the car and run. "I have been in love with you since we were 12 years old, he whispered. "Everything I have done, every choice I have made, every person I have kept away from you, it was all because I love you more than anyone will ever be capable of loving you." The weight of this confession was crushing. Suddenly, every moment of our friendship was recontextualized. Every sabotaged relationship, every friend who had mysteriously drifted away, every time Jake had been right about someone's bad intentions, it hadn't been protection or intuition. It had been manipulation designed to keep me isolated and dependent on him. Have you ever discovered that someone's entire relationship with you was based on a lie? Because what Jake said next made me realize our friendship had never really existed at all. "I know you think I manipulated you," Jake continued, tears now streaming down his face, "but everything I did was to protect what we have. I could see that other people would never appreciate you the way I do, would never prioritize you the way I do. I was trying to save you from getting hurt by people who weren't worthy of you." The manipulation was breathtaking in its scope and sophistication. Jake went on to explain how he had carefully orchestrated the end of my relationship with Marcus by befriending him separately and encouraging him to cheat, knowing I would find out. He had systematically isolated me from potential friends by learning personal information about them and then revealing their flaws or secrets at strategic moments. "But I never lied to you," he insisted. "I never told you anything about those people that wasn't true. I just made sure you saw the truth about them sooner rather than later." The scariest part was how convinced Jake was that he had been doing the right thing. In his mind, he had been my protector, my guardian angel, keeping me safe from people who would hurt me. He couldn't see that by isolating me from everyone else, he had hurt me more profoundly than any failed friendship or relationship ever could have. "I need you to understand," Jake said, reaching for my hand, which I pulled away instinctively, "that what I feel for you is real love. Not the shallow infatuation other people call love, but genuine, sacrificial, devoted love. I have built my entire life around making you happy and keeping you safe." But that's exactly what terrified me most. Jake's love wasn't about me as a person, it was about me as a possession, a project, something he could control and shape to fit his vision of the perfect relationship. He had never loved me. He had loved the version of me that his manipulation had created, the isolated, dependent version that needed him for everything. I told Jake that what he was describing wasn't love, it was obsession, and it was unhealthy for both of us. I explained that real love means wanting someone to grow and be happy, even if that growth takes them away from you sometimes. Real love means trusting someone to make their own decisions. Jake's response was to completely break down. He begged me not to abandon him, promised he would change, swore that he could learn to love me in a healthier way if I would just give him a chance. He said he couldn't imagine his life without me, that I was the only thing that made his existence meaningful. The intensity of his desperation was overwhelming, but it also clarified something important for me. This wasn't about our friendship anymore, this was about Jake's mental health and his unhealthy attachment patterns. What would you have done in this situation? Would you have tried to maintain the friendship, or would you have walked away completely? Me as a possession, a project, something he could control and shape to fit his vision of the perfect relationship. He had never loved me, he had loved the version of me that his manipulation had created, the isolated, dependent version that needed him for everything. I told Jake that what he was describing wasn't love, it was obsession, and it was unhealthy for both of us. I explained that real love means wanting someone to grow and be happy, even if that growth takes them away from you sometimes. Real love means trusting someone to make their own decisions, even if you disagree with them. Jake's response was to completely break down. He begged me not to abandon him, promised he would change, swore that he could learn to love me in a healthier way if I would just give him a chance. He said he couldn't imagine his life without me, that I was the only thing that made his existence meaningful. The intensity of his desperation was overwhelming, but it also clarified something important for me. This wasn't about our friendship anymore, this was about Jake's mental health and his unhealthy attachment patterns. I realized I couldn't fix this situation, and that staying in it would be destructive for both of us. The resolution I came to was painful but necessary, and it's still affecting my life 3 months later. What would you have done in this situation? Would you have tried to maintain the friendship, or would you have walked away completely? I made the decision to end our friendship completely. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, but I realized there was no way to salvage a relationship built on manipulation and obsession rather than genuine respect and care. Jake didn't take it well. For weeks, he tried everything: apologies, promises to change, attempts to make me feel guilty, and eventually anger and accusations. It was like watching someone grieve, and in a way, I guess he was. I've spent the last 3 months learning who I am without Jake's constant influence, and it's been both liberating and terrifying. I'm making new friends, trusting my own judgment, and slowly rebuilding my confidence in navigating relationships independently. The scariest part is realizing how long I lived in that controlled environment without recognizing it. But I'm grateful I finally saw the truth, even though it cost me what I thought was my most important relationship. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more true stories like this, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Your support means everything to me.